And so, we're coming to that point where Rothschild is very strong. His son is Nathan Rothschild. He's the one who is placed in England. Have you ever heard the name Waterloo? Have you ever heard the name ABBA, the band, the Swedish band? Have you ever heard the song Waterloo? Never mind. Anyway, Waterloo is a place. Today is in Belgium. At that time, it was in the hands of the Netherlands. And there was a big battle there between Napoleon and Britain and Germany. That was, of course, on June 15, 1815. And you have to understand that the Duke of Wellington, on behalf of the British, and the King of Prussia were against Napoleon. The whole world was holding its breath. Who's going to win? The stock market of London was holding its breath. They all knew if Napoleon wins, the British stock market is going to collapse. But if Britain will win, the stocks will soar. So what happened is, Mr. Nathan Rothschild had his secret courier, secret envoy in the battlefield to observe what's going on. On 18th of June, just 3 days into the battle, he came all the way to London and he reported to Nathan that Napoleon is being defeated. Nathan is sitting in his room and he says, I cannot report that. I must use this information to create disinformation to benefit from both. So he went to the Department of War and said, my person says that Napoleon is actually winning. He actually went to the stock market and started selling all of his stocks. So all the traders thought, wow, if Nathan Rothschild, that wealthy man, is selling all of his stocks, we're losing the battle. Everybody started selling all their stocks. The stocks plunged a penny for the dollar. And just 10 minutes before the messenger, the real messenger of the fight, came to report their victory, Nathan Rothschild bought all the stocks. And immediately, he was the wealthiest man in England, and he bought the Bank of England of that time. His brothers and his descendants now moving to New York, and they bought the Central Bank of America. And the Federal Reserve today is not the Federal Reserve which you think as a Central Bank of America. It is a privately owned bank by the Rothschild family. And you probably don't even know that. So we're coming to the point where we have to remember that we're dealing with superpowers of people. The Bavarian Illuminati is no longer there. Now, we're entering into the 19th century, and a new organization was born. Now, you have to understand. The Freemasons started in 1717 in London. They were not a bad organization. They were actually the guilds of the builders who were in Europe at that time. They were building cathedrals and churches and hospitals, and there were a bunch of people who wanted to just sit together and maybe do something good with their money. The problem was that whenever the real Illuminati was banned, they decided to infiltrate into the ranks of the Freemasons and take a ride on them. And that is exactly what happened. And now, from 1801 and on, all Freemason lodges are actually Illuminati lodges. All of them. Therefore, you see that the leader of them, the Grand Commander of the Supreme Council, the 33 degree in the Masons level, he's the one who wrote in his book, Lucifer, the Light Bearer. He is the one who bears the light, doubt it not. In fact, another lady, Russian lady, who was 32nd degree in the ancient primitive rite of England, in that Freemason, she wrote, it is Satan who is the God of our planet and the only God. Satan, or Lucifer, represents the centrifugal energy of the universe, this ever-living symbol of self-sacrifice for the intellectual independence of humanity. And now we enter into the 20th century. Ladies and gentlemen, Albert Einstein was an amazing, brilliant person, and he sensed in his brilliance that something is terribly wrong. Albert Einstein wrote, "The minority, the ruling class at present, has the schools and the press and even usually the church as well, and under its thumb. And this enables it to organize and sway the emotions of the masses and make its tool of them." Today, in the 20th century, the Illuminati formed itself now into a cartel of international bankers, industrialists based mostly in Western Europe and in North America. The names of certain families you all know is the Rothschild and the Rockefeller, Morgan, Lazard, Warburg, Schroeder, and Schiff. By the way, only 3 are Jewish families. All the rest are not. In fact, one of them is Chinese, the family of Li. And I know that you may not know that, but they started creating organizations. The Council of Foreign Relations in 1921, the Bilderbergers in 1954, the Club of Rome in 1968, the Trilateral Commission in 1973, the Freemasons are saturated by the Rothschild, the Rotary, the YMCA, and so many Christians innocently belong to those organizations, not knowing that they are saturated, they are filled with Illuminati in their highest levels. David Rockefeller himself, in a Bilderberger meetings on June 1991, said, "It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subjected to the lights of publicity during those years. But the world is now more sophisticated and prepared to march towards a world government. The supernatural sovereignty of the intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national auto-determination practiced in past centuries." David Rockefeller, in his own biography, Memoirs, wrote in page 405, "Some believe that we, the Rockefeller family, are part of the secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as an internationalist and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure, one world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty and I'm proud of it." That's what he himself said. And you know, one of the congressmen in the 1970s exposed it. He said in a speech, Congressman Larry McDonald, he says, "The drive of the Rockefellers and their allies, it is to create a one world government combining super capitalism and communism under the same tent, all under the control. Do I mean conspiracy? Yes, I do. I am convinced there is such a plot, international in scope, generations old in planning, and incredibly evil in intent." And you know what? Mr. McDonald boarded a Korean Airlines flight, a 747 flight, and he shot down by the Soviets. The whole plane. They killed all the passengers just so they can get him. Not amazing? You know, in the 20th century, they came out to light. In 1980, they erected in Georgia the Georgia Guidestones, in which the Illuminati wrote all of their guidelines, the 10 commandments of them. And the first commandment, just look at how the Guidestones look like in several languages, even in Hebrew and Arabic and English and Chinese. And what they wrote there on the stone is, the first one is maintaining humanity under 500 million people. They declare, we're too many people on this planet. We need to lower the number in order to have quality of life. How do you do that? You create wars. You say, look, this is what he said about you. You say to this one, look, this is what he said about you. You start a war between them. Then you give money to this side, and you give money to this side, and they kill each other, and they fight. And 6 million Jews are dying here, and 12 million people are dying there. And it doesn't matter because we have to reduce the planet to 500 million. We are too many. Right now we're over 6 billion. Can you imagine what they're planning? Can you imagine the scope of what they're planning for us in the near future? We're too many people. By the way, I read at least 80 different quotations of leaders, of bankers, of media people that are all saying we're too many people. Unbelievable. Can you imagine? And on the base of that sculpture, there was a stone, and it says that the sponsors of that sculpture is a small group of Americans who seek the age of reason. And I was wondering, what is the age of reason? And when I Googled, I found that the age of reason is actually a book written by Thomas Paine, and he's a man who was a deist. He believed that the Bible consisted of mythology and had value only as a piece of literature, but has no divine inspiration at all. Ladies and gentlemen, they came out in the open once again. As the world going away from Christ, they feel more and more comfortable to come and surface and be there out in the open. And now the 21st century came. In a New Scientist magazine, October 19 of 2011, they found out that the most of the wealth of the world is actually held by 1,300 companies. But if you really go and dig deep, only 147 companies are so tightly knit together that they control 40% of the world fortune. Only 147 companies. 40% of the world. You understand? There's a group of people, about 13 families, that control the entire financial system of the world.